So welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we're doing another episode of From Cover to Cover, where we talk about different books that I've been reading and appropriate war games that cover the same or a similar type of theme, so that you can expand your knowledge and get maybe a deeper or richer experience from both wargaming or from reading. Sometimes it's nice to be able to kind of interact and play out some of the things that you might read about, or some of the things that you play you might want a more deeper academic, richer knowledge of, so you want to read some more about it. I know I am very much that kind of a war game player where, especially with games I maybe don't know as much about, or topics that maybe I'm less familiar with, I'm always like, ooh, this was great, I want to know more. And I believe that history is it is a limitlessly untappable well of exploration and knowledge, and there's so much wealth there for each of us individually that I think books and war games really go hand in hand. And I would also, I think you'd be hard-pressed to say there isn't a wargamer that doesn't have a book of shelves out there, or, yeah, I think that's fair to say. And if you're that person who doesn't, good for you. But I'm pretty sure that, like, if you love wargames, that usually doesn't happen by accident, and typically those people have, or end up having books as well. So anyway, today we're talking about a book called Flight to Arras, and it's by, and I apologize to all of the French viewers out there, it's by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I believe that's how it's pronounced, and if it is not, I am very sorry. But it's a very long name, so I will find a way to shorten it in the rest of this video so I don't have to butcher it 100,000 times for you. So, the author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, he is probably most widely known, or most famous for his book called The Little Prince, which is widely considered as like a children's classic at this point. But also it's a work of timeless philosophy as well. It is not, I think to say it's a children's classic is somewhat reductive, to put it in the same category as something like White Fang or Anne of Green Gables. Those books and a lot of children's classics have a lot of merit to them, but I think The Little Prince, from my experience, is a lot of people's favorite book because it has both the charm of a children's book whilst also carrying some very significant messaging. All that to say, I was very much looking forward to Flight to Arras, and I don't know anyone else who's read this. I was looking around online, and a lot of the people who had read it and reviewed it were people who do not, from what I could tell, who didn't have the same investment in the historical side of what this book presents. And so you'd get people who had read The Little Prince and they're like, I'll read his other stuff. And they're like, this is kind of a war book. and that's totally fine, and it's all based on taste. But I came at this from, I think, quite a different perspective from some of the stuff that you'll read at least on like Goodreads. And I have to tell you right off the bat, this book's incredible. Both as like a little, as like a historical memoir, but also as a book of philosophy. There's so much in this. It kind of blew me away. I don't know what I was expecting from this, but I got so much more out of it than I thought that I would. And I read this, gosh, over the course of 2 or 3 days. It's not very long. You can kind of see the print is very small within the margins, and it's a pretty large typeface, or a large font, I apologize. And I started reading this. I read this. This is a coincidence, and it's kind of terrifying. I read this on the plane to and coming home from San Diego Historicon, which I realized I'm wearing the t-shirt of, and that was unintentional. I probably should have lied and said it was. That's odd. No such thing as coincidence. No, I don't know if that's true. Okay, so what is this? So Antoine de Saint-Exupéry led a very full life, and maybe not the longest life he would have wanted, but this is a book which is basically a condensation or a distillation of his experiences in the French Air Force in 1940 in World War II. He was a reconnaissance pilot, and so he flew... I don't remember what it was. I even looked it up for this and I've forgotten. They were like a three-man reconnaissance plane, and they would fly reconnaissance missions over the German invasion of France in 1940. This book takes the place over a single sortie, a single mission, and what he did is he condensed all of his experiences and kind of put them all into one sortie. So a lot of stuff happens in this, or a lot of, that this is probably more eventful than what every single one of the sorties would have been like. But it's not over the top and action packed still. It's more about like, some of the experiences that he had with his crewmates, or the thoughts, or the stuff that he saw on the ground, or the things, the action that they did experience. All of that's kind of pushed into one night, so lots of things happen throughout the course of the book. However, about 50% of the book is him drifting in and out of his moralizing and philosophizing and thinking about so much, about war itself, about national identity. There's talks about a lot of stuff about brotherhood and comradeship, what that means. There is an incredible, I'm going to call it an essay because it is. There's an incredible essay in this about what it is to lose a war. And I have never read anything quite like that. It was very poignant, and it kind of pierces you right into your being. It really, really does. Some of the way that he expresses himself in this book is absolutely wonderful. Now, I had a hard time getting a hold of this book. I don't think it is the most easy to get a hold of outside of France or maybe Europe. I had to get this from like some publisher out in Connecticut, and it was like the only one, and there's like, it's just the book and translated. There's like no introduction, no nothing. There's a single leaf. So it was kind of like, okay, this is the book. And I just started reading it, and it was wildly compelling, both from the story of what actually happens in it. It's this little reconnaissance plane, and they are effectively sent on a suicide mission. And their entire squadron, which, they mentioned started off with like 45, 50 people in it. Was it 17 crews? I think something like that. Is now down to like 3 crews and 9 people, because they send them out and no one comes back. But they keep sending them out because that's the orders that come through from command. And the information that they would bring back would be so useless because they either couldn't get it to command or command wouldn't act on it anyway. You get into the pointlessness of what we're doing. But then we talk about the duty of what we're doing versus the pointlessness of it. And again, there's so much in here, in such a frankly short book, because it's 250 pages, but it's 250 very small pages. That he just packs in so much into that. So that you get all of the flight stuff. It's them taking off. You get interactions with the weather. You get technical problems and things that like break or happen in the plane as well that they have to deal with. You get the relationship between the recon photographer, the gunner, and the pilot, and them, chatting over the radio, or not chatting, as is the case at times. You get them, dealing with anti-aircraft fire and flak, bad weather, completing the mission, going further with the mission, even though it's very, very hairy. all of these decision points and things that they come up against would, from a military standpoint, from a history standpoint, fascinating. But again, you also get his kind of inner thoughts about those things, how those relate to the wider war effort or to his wider personal philosophies, or how those things build who we are. And it is really a stunning piece of literature. I cannot recommend this highly enough. I've read a lot. That's not true. I've read a good number of books over the course of my short life, but this one is genuinely one of the best. And that's from a content standpoint. Understand that this is still a translation out of French. It's a very good translation in that it was easy to read, but maybe we don't have the same kind of artistic style or flair or those kind of functions that we might have from a native author, because you have to lose some of that in translations, or you get the translator's interpretation of those things. So I'd pay attention to those things less in a book like this, because it's much more about the content, and the content is 10 out of 10, honestly, in this one. There are times this book is deeply tragic or touching, very moving. There are times that there's like joy and ecstasy, there's anger, there's frustration, there's sadness, there's humor, there's darkness, there's light. It's got everything in it, and it is masterfully put together. Genuinely, it is. One of my favorite chapters in this is chapter 11, which, spoiler alert, is to me, it's the thesis of the whole book. And it's absolutely wonderful. There's so many parts of this that I could just kind of read out loud to you. Which I will. So it's on page 93. In the spring of 1940, everybody was repeating an ancient French saw. France is always saved at the 11th hour by a miracle. There's a reason for the miracle. It used to happen occasionally that the beautiful administrative machine would break down, and everybody would agree that it could not be repaired. For want of better, men would be substituted for machine, and men would save France. I mean, some of it is genuinely just staggering of kind of what he's able to kind of put down into paper. Yeah, chapter 11 is this incredible thesis on loss and war. It's absolutely wonderful. He talks about in this how without... there's not really a good way to say this without it seeming like martyrdom. But he talks about how France's role in the war was to lose, and what it means to lose, and how losing that war meant that others could fight on. But you have to read it to really get, like, I'm not doing it any justice. It's a stunning piece of literature. Genuinely it is. This comes with my highest possible recommendations. I also like, aviation and aerial combat in war, so like, this was right up my alley. Even though this is a seemingly, like it's a reconnaissance flight. They're not out trying to shoot people down. The whole aviation world, I think, is fascinating. Really, 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 really good. So let's talk about some games that we can play that feed into this. Because, I'll be honest, there aren't any. That's not true. But I don't have any, or I don't know of any specifically French World War II aerial war games. Now, there are French planes, I believe, in some of Wing Leader, which is from GMT Games. So you can play those, but that's an aerial combat game, and that's fine, but that's really not what the book is about. And so I've got some games here, and you'll have to kind of bear with me about some of what we're going to do here. So the first kind of two games I'm going to talk about are Target for Today and Target for Tonight. These are both from Legion War Games, and they are that solitaire, narrative style, bit of a lot of chart rolling, but it's story-driven games. You have an air crew. This Target for Today, it's typically like B-17s. I think you fly B-24s as well. Target for Tonight, you're doing like Lancasters, Wellingtons, that kind of thing. So none of it's French, but you get the elements that are highlighted in the book of the unity and the comradeship within a single plane, because that's all you play in this, is a single plane, and it's the experiences that they go through. And much like in Flight to Arras, in both these games, a lot of stuff happens to you. A lot of stuff happens and you have to deal with it, as opposed to you going out and like proactively going and fighting things that you might do in other war games. They're assigned a mission, you fly the course, you take the pictures, you fly back. You're not out there trying to hunt, you're not out there trying to do dogfights, and very much like that in these two games, you're an aircrew, you're assigned a mission, you fly the path, and you do your mission, and you come back. You have to deal with the weather, you have to deal with the technical failures, you have to deal with crew members getting hurt if you get into combat. Combat might happen, it might not, you might avoid combat. You then have to do your mission and do it well, and you might have to then spend more time over the target kind of redoing your mission if you mess it up, and then you got to fly all the way back home as well. So these games illustrate that side of things really, really well. I would lay particular emphasis on Target for Tonight in this one, because whilst Flight to Arras happens during the day, it is a single plane. They don't have any escorts, they don't have any support, it's just them. And Target for Tonight, you're in a bomber stream of Lancasters, but that silence, that darkness in the night feels much more lonely and claustrophobic. And so I think this one sits just that extra little bit well, but these two games are very, very, very similar in their execution. So you could really do either one based on your theme and flavor. The next one is a very similar style, and this is Night Fighter Ace. And when I say similar style, it's a solitaire kind of chart rolling narrative game. This one is probably a bit simpler, fewer charts. There's some really neat parts mechanically about how the game design and your fuel consumption is used that I really, really like. Night Fighter Ace might be my favorite Greg Smith game. It's this and Silent Victory. I almost said Pacific Victory. Silent Victory. Those two, probably my two favorite ones of his. But I highlight this because in this one, you're a night fighter, you're trying to shoot down Lancasters, and you are a combat-based plane. But I mention this one because it is you and your gunner. There's just the two of you. And so it's that much smaller crew that you have. And you might get a... do you have a funker in here as well? Yes. A lot of the time you'll also have a radio man. So it's the crew of three, which is exactly what's in the book. And so you get that much smaller relationship there where if one of your crew gets injured, it's immediately a crisis. Whereas in something like B-17, your crew's quite large. If one of them gets wounded, we can make it. If one of your crew gets wounded in a night fighter race, you're in mega trouble. And so where in Flight to Arras, you know, it's the every so often the periodic checking in with everyone, making sure they're breathing their oxygen correctly and not like going to sleep, because it would be very, very bad. You get this similar feel in this with that very small and very, as a result, fragile crew. The other thing that I would say about this one is your plane is much smaller. These very large bombers, you can get strafed, you can get raked with fire. It's not the end of the world necessarily. Whereas a bad strafe in Night Fighter Race and you're gone. very difficult to survive. It's more easy than their oh gosh, the interceptor ace. Holy crap! Where you're flying like fog wolves, and it's like, okay, you get shot, you die. Okay, new plane. You can survive a bit better than that, but much less than the other target games. So that fragility, both of your crew and of your plane, that feels very similar to how the things that they were experiencing in this book, where the crew is so small and so personal, and the plane was not that large, and it's one AA shell, and we're going to be gone. Whereas you can survive some flak in a B-17, right? You can take a hit or two, no big deal. So even though, like, thematically it's wildly different, I think experientially from the plane and the crew standpoint, and again, you don't have any support really. So that loneliness is in here with these night games as well. So this was a really good one that I really enjoyed as well. There's a couple other games that I will mention that I do not have. No Retreat, the Polish and French front from GMT Games. We have played that. We played the Polish version of that, but basically there's a France version of No Retreat. I think it might be kind of hard to get a hold of these days. I don't know if that's in print anymore, but that is the game of not just France 1940, and it's that collapse on the Western Front, that retreat backwards, trying to counterattack as and when you can. That system isn't for everyone. I actually, it's not my favorite system because I have a hard time wrapping my head around some of the results. And if you know anything about the player's aid, we never get the normal results. We only ever get the weird results on every die roll ever. And so it would cause like real crazy things to happen again and again and again. It was like, you like lose control of your troops and they like have to counterattack where they wouldn't have done, or you wouldn't have wanted them to because they get sucked into an ambush kind of a thing. And there's some neat aspects to that, but I struggle with it because I don't fully understand how to make it work properly. But that is a game on the Fall of France that you can play. There's plenty of Dunkirk games out there, but that's like post this and not really. It's not really the same thing. They mentioned the BEF leaving, but to me, something like Unconditional Surrender is a really wonderful companion to the larger themes in Flight to Arras. Because where Flight to Arras is this very micro scale of a little single reconnaissance sortie, the much broader implications that he talks about, you will play out in Unconditional Surrender. There is specifically a Fall of France scenario that you could do if you wish. That would be extremely boring, trust me. But it's, to me, this game is massive. This is a big game. Big 2 maps, very, 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 very long. Absolutely incredible. This is a desert island game for me. It can do so much, but you get the entirety of Europe, even and North Africa, but you'll see the collapse of France in this, and then what you see is the wider implications of that. What does that really mean strategically for the Germans? Very good, you gain a whole bunch of stuff, but what does that mean within the grander context of the war? What does that allow to happen? If France falls like this, we butt up against things like the English Channel and the Atlantic, and the Germans then have to contend with those things. And it's the laying up of France on the altar of eventually unconditional surrender. And France doing that somewhat voluntarily. It was very, very interesting talking about, reading about that in this, where, the country as a whole was in some significant turmoil politically, socially, economically as a result of the First World War. And then the preparations that were made as mobilization was beginning for World War II, and what ended up happening, and being able to kind of be defeated, and what defeat means, and doing so with dignity and purpose to be able to come back later. A fascinating kind of part in the book, and I get to talk about Unconditional Surrender, which is one of my favorite games. But again, this is a big, grand strategic game about absolutely everything: politics, economy, tactical combat, absolutely everything, and it's a stunning product. But you get to see some of the things that he talks about at that very grand scale. But you do the tactical combat. You do go through the Ardennes. You do these maneuvers. You take the cities instead of some of the other games that are at this scale where it's like France is one big blob and you just put guys in it and it's gone now. There's more nuance to that game as a result, and I really, really, really like it. And lastly, there's a game that I haven't played that I do want to play, but I cannot for the life of me get a hold of it reasonably, and that is France 40 from Mark Simonich. There is a Zocbond system game or a 40x game, depending on how you want to refer to that system, from Mark Simonich and GMT Games called France 40, and it is his Zocbond system with the defeat of France. And so that's one that I'm looking forward to and want to play, because he talks about, an army in retreat and the civilians in retreat, and how, you'd fly up, you'd fly back, but you'd have to fly to a different airfield because the Air Force had retreated whilst you were up. You get to see that in a Zocbond system that's extremely robust and very good. I hope France 40 is good. If you've played it, let me know. But that's one that I'm kind of looking forward to hunt down and kind of play as well. That's the games I want to talk about today. If there's any others or anything that you would recommend that you might feel is appropriate, let me know in the comments, because I want to know more. We don't play a lot of France 1940 games because everyone's like, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion, but there are some things within that definitely weren't. This is called Flight to Arras, but the Battle of Arras, if you've read it, if there was any kind of communication and coordination, the Germans could have been dealt a significant blow and had their supply lines up to Dunkirk cut, and they could have been in some significant trouble. But it was on this small little scale. I'm pretty sure it was there. That we just often gets overlooked. So I'd like to do more and experience more of that kind of a thing. So let me know if there's anything in the comments, but if you get an opportunity to read Flight to Arras, please, please, please do. This is an incredibly human work, and it was interesting. I think one of my favorite things that I read about this book was from someone who clearly could not have cared less about the history, and was like, if this book does nothing, this book might do nothing else but to serve that he got to live an extra 2 years after he wrote this and gave us The Little Prince. So his survival through the Air Force and having that memoir documented, if it's only for that, it's wonderful because we got The Little Prince out of it. But I think this book stands on its own two legs. If you have any interest in kind of military affairs, but really, the military stuff's good and interesting, but this is so much more a very, very deeply reflective memoir that's based on his military experiences and comradeship. It's an absolutely stunning piece of work. Please, please go and read it. And then please come and talk to me about it. Just any old comments anywhere. It's social media. Come talk to me at a convention. I want to talk to people about this, and I don't know anyone that's read it. So, Flight to Arras from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Please go read it. Play any of these games. Let me know if there's other games about France in 1940 that I should check out. But appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander for theplayersaid.com.